Hey, welcome to the Florida Masters Podcast. My name is John Baird, your host. Hey, I'm super excited for this episode. I'm really excited that this guest came on. He came all the way from Nebraska, Omaha for this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't come for this podcast, but he came far for something very big we'll probably get into during the show. But before we get into that and who he is and what he does, we have admin tasks because we do what we got to do. So please follow us on all platforms at For the Masters Podcast and on YouTube at JB the Masters Podcast. Week after week, we're going to talk about the views. We just need to add to the subscriber count, so let's keep on adding to the subscriber count, okay? But hey, I said I'm super excited for the guest. You know, he's a politician. He's just a great civil rights leader from Nebraska, Omaha, and his name is Preston Love. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing fine, John, and I surely appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
For sure.
And it's fun on a lot of levels. I'm away from home. I'm in Washington, D.C., and sitting down with family and friends for dinner, and now having this opportunity to communicate just what's on my mind and what could be on your mind. So I'm looking forward to the time that we have.
Absolutely. Nah, it's always a pleasure. And so let's tell everyone why you're in Washington, D.C. It's a big deal.
Well, I am in Washington, D.C., but before I tell you, it should be said that at this juncture in my life, I don't do a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
And so I'm not like, I did work for IBM for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I used to travel almost 3 or 4 times a week.
Yes.
That was another world,
Yeah.
another age, another era, but I don't travel a lot. I say all of that to say that it's just not another trip. This is a trip. I am here in Washington, D.C. because I had the honor, I was invited individually to attend a celebration of sorts by the President of the United States to come to Washington, along with others, to celebrate the post-signing celebration of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so today, we were invited to the White House. That didn't know exactly what to expect in terms of the environment. We were out on the grounds, that's how they say that, just in case. Are you going to the grounds? But with thousands of people, all who were individually invited. That's what was unique.
Yeah.
It wasn't like an open meeting. It wasn't even first come, first serve. It was, I received a special, and so did they, I assume, invitation to attend. It was a celebration of a very important juncture in America. The current president, President Biden, has accomplished some major legislation.
Yeah.
In spite of so many things that he inherited, so many things that have occurred. I've just mentioned one just to put it in context, but he surely inherited an economy that was fragile.
Yes.
He then inherited a pandemic that was, paralyzed our country for 2 years. He inherited, I wouldn't say inherited, but he received the unfortunate part of his administration of almost the beginning of a new war, and all of that, so many other things that were residuals. And so this meeting today was important for those who are, must say, supporters of those bills, including this last one, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, to congratulate ourselves, because many of us worked hard, and him congratulating himself. But there was a secret agenda too.
Yeah, for sure.
Would you like to know?
I would.
The secret agenda was to fire us up.
Yeah.
To go back home to our various locations and work hard to get to maintain a majority in both the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. Because if in fact that this president does have not the majority within his own party, then everything is going to stop and be paralyzed. So there's a lot at stake.
And Preston, well, I'm going to cut you off here. For everyone listening and watching, what party is that?
Well, I was trying to be to protect your but the Democratic Party.
Okay.
And so, and if you want to just hear just a little small sliver, I see there are really 3 parties now, and that's me talking. There is the Democratic Party, which I'm part of, an officer in the state of Nebraska. I'm the vice chair of the Democratic Party. There is the Republican Party, and the Republican Party and Democrats disagree on many policies, but we have had years of my life where we disagreed, but we were not disagreeable.
Yeah.
And then we have really the Trump and his juggernaut, and the Trumpers, if you will. That's a whole other story, and I violently, I take that back. I don't violently. I'm only talking intellectually violently.
Yes.
Disagree with his policies, but also feel that he is anti-American, and he surely has done as much as he could to disrupt and attack democracy. That includes democracy in the abstract, democracy as a generic, and democracy as it relates to my race and African Americans, and our restrictiveness that is attached to trying to restrict our voting and trying not to count votes in our areas, and new policies to restrict voting. So all of that, I'm saying that's where the 3 different areas are. So to answer your question, long answer, is I'm here as a practicing Democrat, both within and out of the party.
Yeah.
Many people are Democrats or Republicans or whatever, but they vote that way, but they're not practicing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I'm a operative, if you will. And part of the reason why I was invited today and I'm here is because of that.
That's awesome, and that's a pretty big deal. And so what can you tell us about the Inflation Reduction Act?
Well, it's made up of many parts, and I probably feel uncomfortable because I may leave some of the parts out, but a couple of them to be specific. One is related to me and all those people around the country and in my community that are like me, meaning we're elders, or we're aged. And that is that one of the things that you'll find when you get older is your health challenges are greater. And when your health challenges are greater, guess what? You have prescription drugs that become a necessity, number one, and 2, a bigger part of your budget. And it can be catastrophic for people financially and health-wise because sometimes they can't afford it and they have to make choices between food and drugs. It seems maybe that's not the case. It is the case.
It is the case.
And so one of the aspects of this new bill that we're here to celebrate is that they're putting a cap on how much seniors will have to spend $2,000 on prescription drugs. So once you reach that, I don't know how it's going to be implemented, but there's a cap. That's a biggie.
That's awesome.
That's a biggie. And also that Medicare is going to be given the authority to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies who are gouging the prices and get those the cost of an individual prescription down to reasonability. Those are too big. Another one, again, I'm not going to list them all, but that's one that's on my mind. The other is something that I've always felt very uncomfortable about and somewhat intellectually angry is billionaire companies that don't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
And so this, another aspect of this bill is that every corporation has to pay a minimum of 15%.
Yeah.
And now that doesn't sound that large. I'm thinking of a couple corporations who were multi-billion-dollar gross revenue and paid zero taxes because they use all of the high-paid lawyers and lawyers. Oh my God! Yeah, no,
For sure.
But pay their professionals to work the system and not pay any taxes. And so that works against our country because all that revenue is just really being manipulated, and then that makes it more difficult for we have to pay the difference. That's not fair.
Yeah.
That's not fair. And so that's a major piece.
Absolutely.
So those are a couple of the many aspects of this. And the other thing that it should be made clear of is this is the most recent good news.
Yeah.
But we've had the infrastructure.
Yeah.
We had stimulus, the bills for stimulus money that many of us received to help us get through the period where our economy was so affected by COVID. So we had the stimulus, but we had this multi-billion-dollar infrastructure that will create jobs and do the things to our infrastructure that need to be done, bridges and highways. I mean, it's really amazing. Remember, I don't know if you remember this, can't give you the date or the location because I forgot, but the president was visiting the city in the United States, and while he was in the city, the bridge fell down.
I remember that. Yeah.
And so, and every state has, but that's another part. But what I'm saying is there were several major pieces of legislation that this president has implemented, and it's time to say, hey, when we play basketball or football, let's use football. You go score a touchdown. Nobody scores touchdowns. Thank you very much. Here's the ball, referee. Oh no, you hey, because you have worked hard and got in the end zone. Well, this is I'm here, and we were here today to do some end zone dancing. That's what we're here. Yeah.
That's incredible, and obviously you've been doing this work for a long time. And so let's tell everyone where you're from, and did you always want to get into politics?
Oh, absolutely not. Pretty much the early part of my life, I was all focused on athletics.
Okay.
And so I was a high school athletic star, and I wanted to, play in the big leagues or pro football, as you might want to call it. I played big time college football, and then was drafted by the Detroit Lions. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's awesome.
I want to see how many times I can get you to say I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I got you for one. But I played, was drafted by the Detroit Lions, did not make it.
Okay.
But got my little bonus money and got out of Dodge.
That's awesome.
But I surely wanted to. And so I received a degree from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln in economics, which was kind of unique because, first of all, there weren't a lot of, you might not know this, and on another way of describing my life, we could get into it, but I'll use this one example and stay there. When I played for the University of Nebraska, I'm going to put a pin in that and say, if you go to a University of Nebraska football team right now, I don't know how many there are, but there's several blacks per position. Yeah. And there's 22 positions. Yeah. So do the math. There's a whole lot of black. When I played for Nebraska, there were only 8 blacks on the Nebraska entire. And we had more than the rest of the Division 8. With the exception of the HBCU. And so that's the time frame. My point is that I was pleased to be drafted, but my focus was on athletics. Yeah. Your question was about my always wanted to be in politics, the answer was no, I wanted to be in athletics.
Yeah.
And then after that, I had a standing offer as a graduate in economics from the University of Nebraska, uniquely so. But I was getting ready to say most of the other athletes didn't tackle some of that kind of subject matter. But had a standing offer from IBM. I joined IBM, someone as a pioneer. If you're interested in knowing that, we could talk about that. But and was with IBM for 15 years, and so no politics come up yet.
For sure.
And so then I left IBM. Your viewers may find this interesting, and I started my own computer company in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1980. And guess what? I sold. This is another, I think, going to be. I didn't know that. I sold the very first Apple in the state of Georgia.
Did you really?
Yeah. And Atlanta, of course. I sold the very first Apple in the state.
That's insane.
And my little retail store, I had the first retail store selling in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I was living in Atlanta, and I was unique and popular with many folks because I had this unique business nobody understood.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember I'm getting off the subject.
It's okay.
But I remember I got a business call from the Yellow Pages because I had a business and they wanted to sell those. People probably don't even know what Yellow Pages were, right? That's when we had telephones, and to find out what the number was, you had to
look them up in the Yellow Pages.
Look them up in a big book. So you had the Yellow Pages, which were business, and the White Pages, which were business. Oh man, it was fun to talk about that.
Yeah.
But they called on me for me to run an ad in the Yellow Pages, and I said, well, yeah, but I want to run a new category, and I think you all should hear me. And I said, you have to have a category called computers. They said, oh no. Excuse me, sir, but that's all right. We know what we're doing. So how wrong were they? But that's how much I was an innovator at that particular juncture.
Crazy.
And so, okay, here's how this ties back to your question. And that is that at that point, no politics. However, my business failed. I'd be more than happy on another podcast to tell you what happened with my business. I made some what I'd call Harvard Business School mistakes.
Okay.
My business was successful and failed. Oops, that should catch your interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Basically, what I did is I used current operating money and spent too much of my current operating money on what I thought was the future of the company. And so what that did is come back to haunt me operationally. It was a classic mistake.
Yeah.
It was a naive mistake. But anyway, so my business failed, and so I, being myself, highly educated, highly experienced, having worked for IBM for 50 years, innovative, and guess what else?
What?
Unemployed.
Yeah. For sure.
And so here I am unemployed in the city of Atlanta with all the greatness going on, and there's a gentleman who was running for mayor. His name was Andrew Young. Andrew Young is a name familiar to a lot of people, but he surely was with the entourage with Martin Luther King. He had, by that time, had been a congressman. Mm-hmm. He had also been the ambassador to the UN and was running to be the second black mayor of the city of Atlanta. Okay, and so I'm looking for a job. Someone said, well, why don't you go volunteer and drive Andrew Young?
Yeah. And
maybe if he wins, you might, but be good networking and so forth. So that's what I did. I went and drove. Make a long story short, it didn't take him long to figure out that maybe I could do more.
He went and driving.
And so make a short story out of this. It's already long, but shorter.
It's okay.
Is when he was elected, I was one of the 3 people that was appointed into the city of Atlanta. I was the budget director and later the commissioner of planning for the city of Atlanta. You didn't know that?
Didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, but here's what the bigger story, and that is I was involved in politics, but I was more of a technician because nobody in that time frame knew how to use computers in elections. I did. I figured out some way, and that made me unique. But I wasn't thinking of myself as a politician. I was thinking of myself as a computer person in a campaign.
Yeah.
That's two different things. But it didn't take long before I became immersed with that, and two things happened. One, I became familiar with and then very close and part of the inside civil rights community.
Yeah.
Because I was working with one of their icons very closely. I was one of his close advisors and friends, Dr. Andrew Young. And so that might be Andrew Young. And so my point was this, okay. I knew, so the first thing was I became immersed in the family. That's a story that has some other roots. But one of the people who would come in and out of town during that period, one of his fellow associates was Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
And so Jesse Jackson and I met, we became good friends, and almost immediately he began to ask me, could I help him do this, could I help him do that? And I was excited. I kind of held the Reverend Jesse Jackson on a pedestal because he was kind of famous a little bit in Chicago with the Operation Breadbasket. So I kind of knew of him and was kind of interesting. And also a little aside that in it now. So let me just say this. Andrew Young was elected mayor in 1980. In 1983, Harold Washington ran to be mayor of Chicago. And I was sent by Andrew Young to go to Chicago. You didn't know that?
I know.
And I was very instrumental in helping Harold Washington become the first black mayor of Chicago in 1983.
Insane.
But so back to with all of that, and my reputation was, oh man, this guy knows how to use a computer. And they thought I was a genius because no one knew how to use a computer. I was a dummy, but I didn't know how to use a computer. But anyway, to make a long story short, on this part of the story is Jesse and I became close, and he asked me, would I be willing to take a leave of absence from Andrew Young and come with him and explore the idea for his presidency.
Yeah.
And that's the story. I went on to become his campaign manager.
That's incredible.
So that's how I got in politics.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a dream. It's just something that evolved. And now, 45 years later, I have been heavily involved politically a lot since then.
Yeah, absolutely. Something to note is like in 2020, you made a run for like the Nebraska U.S. Senate seat.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and what prompted that?
Yeah. By 2020, anybody who doesn't have to be a mathematician will start figuring out I'm getting up in the age. But I had gained by 2020 a very wonderful reputation.
Yep.
And credibility, trusted within the community and quite frankly with the Democratic Party. And so there came the 2020 election. We had a fellow who was running as the Democratic candidate for Senate. He turned out to be a scoundrel.
Okay.
And he turned out to be very, he did some things, I'm trying to think of the right words, but he was disrespectful and did some things as relates to some of his women's staffers.
Okay.
And so one of them blew the whistle on him, and the Democratic Party disavowed him.
Yes.
And asked him to resign and let them appoint another candidate for the Senate. He refused. And so the Democrats could not put another candidate on the ballot while he refused. if he would have been a straightforward guy, which obviously he wasn't, he would resign. Someone could have been put in. So they asked me, would I be willing to do the unthinkable, which is be their candidate, albeit a write-in, which is, for those who know politics, is the uphill fight. But I said yes as a favor. And so I ran for the United States Senate as the Democratic nominee. And the punchline on this story is I received more write-in votes for the United States Senate than any Nebraska had ever received in the history of Nebraska. I received more write-in votes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so that record stands. The record was somewhere around 16,000. I got 62,000 write-in votes for Senate, and was able to talk about the issues and represent myself and the party in some ways that,
Yeah.
And so part of the reason why I get invited to
the White House.
White House is because of some of those things. But that run for the United States Senate was historic because an African American had not run for United States Senate, but more so that I kind of showed that there's potential in the state of Nebraska, a red state, that even an African American could get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's incredible to me. And I just think it's awesome, actually. So, what prompted you to say yes? Because I know you have a lot going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was a pandemic during that time.
Yeah.
So that was a pandemic environment. Plus, your company, your nonprofit, Black Voters Matter. So what made you say yes?
Well, it's a good question. I think the simple couple answers come to mind. One is they really asked me to do the party a favor.
Okay.
That was a big part of it.
Okay.
We both knew, meaning me and the party knew, that low odds for winning.
Okay.
And so I wasn't ego tripping on that. And so I thought, yes, I'll do the party a favor. And then I did have something else that occurred to me, and it really turned out to be true, was that my candidacy motivated the black folks to come out and vote.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that was going to help other Democrats. That all worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's really, when the story is written, a lot of people might overlook that part because they don't understand the black community.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of why I said yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, do you plan on making another run here soon?
No, I don't. I think that part of my career is pretty. I'm absolutely sure it's over, but it's not over because I feel like I've aged out.
Yeah.
I am older than the regular or average candidate, but I do think we've got a lot of young people that people like me should be spending our time nourishing and growing them, not running for office. That is more ego. So that's one reason why not. The other reason is I have, I'm pretty busy. I teach at the university in Black Studies and Political Science. I'm an author. I've written 5 books, 2 of which are children's books. I have 2 nonprofit organizations and a profit and one for profit. I do, your audience may note that we do an annual tour.
Yep.
Which you've been on,
Amazing.
where we take high school kids throughout the South and teach them about their own history. And now, most recently, I have a new business, which is to do tours of the African American community in Omaha, Nebraska. It's called the North Omaha Legacy Tour, where we're doing the same thing we're doing the national tour. We're teaching adults about we're teaching our community a little bit about some things they may have forgotten or not aware of in their community, but mainly what we're doing is we're teaching people outside the black community to quit having biases, misunderstandings, have this mystique of wrongly about the culture and the history of the black community. That has turned out to be extremely successful. I'm very proud. Since January, when we started the business, we've done over 100 tours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're sitting now, 1st of September. I purchased a 15-passenger bus when we started the business. I just, breaking news, just bought another bus that has 25 seats.
Hey, let's go.
Yeah. So, because we have the number of people who want to be on a tour adds up to more than 50.
Yeah, for sure.
Lots of that. So I've invested in that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And well, you're doing amazing work. And the Black History Tour, the stop that I went to was in Atlanta, Georgia. Super historical for the Black community. Yeah. But you gave some speeches, and you had all the kids do like a reports on like Black icons in our history. Yeah. And you did a impression of someone.
Oh, I forgot that. Yeah. I forgot that. I sprung that on you.
You did, and it was incredible.
You want me to tell you who it is?
Yes.
Want me to tell you who it is? Yeah. Well, I'm kind of honored that you remember, John.
Sure.
That we surely did. We if I could just take a 30 seconds, this tour that we're speaking of, we do take 40 high school kids every year, and we take a lot of adults. And you were there for part of the tour. But we go quickly. We go to Memphis, Tennessee. We go to Jackson, Mississippi. We go to Birmingham. We then go to Tuskegee. We go to Selma. We go to Montgomery and Atlanta. We do that in a week. All expenses paid for the students. That's why I have gray hair, raising that money every year. Oh, I have breaking news to tell you about the tour too. But we do that, and so. But on our last day in Atlanta, we have what probably could be called a banquet, where we go to the Friendship Baptist Church there, which is quite a church. Right?
Yeah, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, phenomenal church, huge, beautiful church, and we have a dinner before it's the tour in effect is over. We're having a kind of a let's relax and enjoy this last meal, get on the bus and head back to Omaha. But we give some accolades. We ask the student to give reports on those, and then I usually give some sort of make some comments. But this year I added a little feature, and that was one of my idols historically was the Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, who was the congressman from Harlem from 1944 to 1970. He was an amazing man. Anyway, I wrote several years ago, researched and wrote a one-man show where I become Adam Clayton Powell. So that little clip you saw was me doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that. And for everyone watching, listen, it was an amazing clip. It was captivating for me. And
I didn't announce it. I just did. But that's where it came from.
That's awesome.
Yeah. His story is quite a story. And so I have breaking news for anyone listening, but for your podcast and for you, we're gonna. Well, first of all, we had breaking news last year.
Okay.
And we went a couple places that you went, but you didn't maybe know that we hadn't done it before. We had never really did what I'd call a tour of Black Atlanta.
Yes.
We were in Black Atlanta and did things, King Center and many others, but we did a tour of Black Atlanta. It was great. Yeah, that was great. So we're going to do that every year.
Tyler Perry Studios was...
Oh, but that's the second thing, is we went to the Tyler Perry Studio.
Yeah.
And we're hoping over the years they're going to let us go further into, but that was the second one. And the third breaking news for last year was we actually went to Medgar Everett's home and walked around. You weren't with us.
I wasn't. Mm-hmm.
But we went. Medgar Evers, of course, was the great civil rights leader from Mississippi, Jackson to be exact, who was shot in his driveway in 1963. We went to his house. And so, but this year, we also went and celebrated one of the financiers one of the millionaires of the civil rights movement, Mr. A.G. Gaston in Birmingham. We did all that last year. This year we're adding Tulsa.
Oh, Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Yes.
Black Wall
We're
Street.
going to go to Black Wall Street.
That's incredible.
That's nobody knows that. This is breaking news.
It's breaking news for the podcast.
We're going to go to, in all seriousness, can't wait till we do that.
Nah, that should be incredible.
Yeah.
A super historical place. You know, and there was something else that stuck with me when you were, you know, doing closing remarks. And you just kind of, like, it was like a commission to all the kids to like kind of like, you like anything you want to do, you can do. And you told them like to, you know, none of the things that happened to you in the past matter.
Yeah.
Like what was that prompting?
Well, it's just the truth of it is that what I offer the kids, the young people, is my life experiences.
Yeah.
I've lived a long time. I'm not going to say on the air how long that's been. but I've experienced, you know, we've talked about some of the things I've done and experienced, so I've done that. But the accumulation of that is wisdom.
Yeah.
And so I'm not giving a motivational speech in the abstract. I'm giving them a talk about the real. And the real from someone who's lived it, not someone who's thought about it only. And so that's partly why we do the tour. We're trying to teach them their own history, get them to respect it, and hopefully to go out and learn it. Oops, we got a problem. It's somewhere along the line they're going to have some hiccups in their lives and otherwise, and I'm trying to tell them, so what?
So what?
Yeah, and that's why I do what I do.
Nah, and it's definitely impressionable. And like I said, like I think that's my first time meeting you, and it was impressionable on me. You know, and it means the world that you took the time to jump on the podcast. But before we let you go,
Sure.
Where can people find you? Where can they find all the initiatives and everything you're part of?
What, you mean tonight? No, I'm kidding. Let me go ahead and tell you where you can find it at. I'll be sleeping in my bed. And I got to get up early in the morning. So get on the plane and return to Omaha. But I, of course, am based in Omaha, Nebraska. And my website is the number 4urban.org. And on my website, it pretty much chronicles, you know, with the tabs, the things that we do. And we've talked about a lot of them tonight. My tours, all of my tours, my books, my teaching. I am a very regular, I don't consider myself a writer, John. Mm-hmm. I consider myself a voice now. Yeah. But it ends up on paper. Yeah. So I'm my voice on matters that I've gained wisdom on, that I want to share, or I want to motivate, because it needs to be done. Absolutely. And so my parting words would be something about that the communities that maybe watch your podcast, I'm speaking of both, but there's different motivations. But for the African American community and others who may be watching, I don't think we're understanding what's at stake now for our country and the world, who's faced with divisiveness, divisions, climate challenges, the equality of women and the right for women to choose, mass incarceration, poverty, all of that. We can't sit back and just see what happens. Yeah. And so my parting comments is we evolve in our own way. Got to stand up and handle our business, even if it is telling the truth and being active at your dinner table. Absolutely. It starts right there. Absolutely. And it's been my pleasure to be on your podcast, and I invite myself back.
For sure. For sure. Anytime, Preston.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining for the Masters Podcast.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I had an amazing episode with Mr. Preston Love. He's just a phenomenal spirit and inspiring story, and he's been doing it for almost 50 years. From IBM to being an activist in the civil rights movement. He's just a phenomenal spirit, and I'm extremely happy he was able to jump on the podcast. There's a lot of gems in this episode, so please take advantage of it, and thank you for listening for the Masses Podcast.